The October edition of the Ryder Report is devoted in large part to dealing with one of the greatest issues that I see facing real estate consumers today, and that is media misinformation. And I devote a considerable proportion of this month's edition of the Ryder Report to responding to this absolute, what I call the great seething mass of media information. Right now, mainstream media seems to be obsessing over downturn, particularly in the Sydney market, but they seem to be extrapolating that situation to a national crisis, which is certainly far from the truth. There are many strong rising in growth markets across Australia right now, but we're seeing headlines every day talking about prices falling across Australia. So I deal with that in my editorial, the feature section, and also the section that's devoted to what I call the war on misinformation, trying to set the record straight, trying to switch the focus to some of the more positive things that are happening out there, markets that property investors, I think, need to be aware of in terms of places that they could be considering buying. And right now, regional Australia is throwing up many of the strong growth markets, which is in many ways what I call a win-win-win situation for investors, because the strong regional markets have much lower buying prices than the major cities, much higher rental yields, and if you buy in the right places, very very good potential for capital growth. This month's edition also has a focus on what's happening with rents in the major cities, something that's not very often covered in mainstream media. They tend to have a major focus on what's happening with median prices up or down, particularly at the moment. And rents is a very good market barometer. I find quite often positive changes in a city's rental market as a precursor to an upcycle with prices. We saw that actually with Sydney before its recent 5-year price boom. There were a couple of years which rents rose a lot, but prices hadn't, and that was a signal that prices were going to do something in the Sydney market, and certainly that happened. We've seen a similar thing happen recently in Hobart. Very tight vacancies in Hobart, strong rental growth, and prices have followed. And so other markets now around Australia, amongst the capital cities such as Canberra, are starting to exhibit similar situations, something to be aware of. We have the usual state-by-state sections also, as we always do in every monthly edition of the Ryder Report, where we discuss what's going on in each of the 8 states and territories, the major markets. I'd just like to end with a quote. We have a quote of the month at the front of each of these monthly newsletters, and I think there's a very relevant quote there from Noel Whittaker, who is a veteran advisor on investments of all sorts, including property investment, the author of 22 books, and he very strongly argues the case that we should ignore any commentators or any articles that talk about Australia as a single market. He makes the point that we have many different markets. You can't compare what's happening in Cairns, what's happening in Melbourne, with what's happening in Perth, with what's happening in Ballarat and Victoria. And he expresses very strongly his frustration with generalised commentary, and I share that frustration. It's coming particularly from economists and from the ratings agencies who talk about Australia as a single market. And in this edition of the Ryder Report, I argue very strongly that that's not valid, and that we have to understand the various regional differences, and out of that understand that right now, while Sydney and Melbourne might be trending downwards, there are other major markets around Australia where the trend is positive. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from Hotspotting signing off. I will speak to you again soon.